The thing to be was decadent.
Fancy a woman, a young girl, coming to work for a man.
She said, "You are an indolent and feckless girl."
And the policeman stepped right out of his sideway, and I went right into his arms. And then one day my brother said to me, "Why don't you go and get something to do, not go mooning about the place?" So I couldn't think of anything I could do, but he said he'd been down Victorian Street and he had looked in a great big shop window there, and there they had some sort of little machine, and ladies were working this machine, and he understood they were called typewriters.
The headmistress of the school had me up. She said, "You are an indolent and feckless girl. You are drawing in your exercise book when you ought to be concentrating on your work. Because, child, what are we put into this world for?" And I looked at her and said, "Sometimes I don't think any of us know."
This is the typewriter I used to sit in the window with and type on, and the crowds outside used to be still looking, all waiting to see what I was doing. And I'd only been there about 4 or 5 months, and she put me on the staff, and I received this big sum of 8 shillings a week.
When I left school, my father said, "I don't know what we shall do with Bertha. She wouldn't be any use, Bertha wouldn't be any use at anything but drawing. She had better go somewhere where they talk about drawing all the time and are drawing, nothing but drawing. She'd better go to London." So I went. Mud everywhere. Of course, hansom cabs slurring through the mud, and where there wasn't mud there was fog, and in between was us enjoying ourselves. Everybody wore hats, of course. Over their profuse underclothes, which was still the go, they wore long skirts and had to be held up out of the mud. We were very often mud to our knees spattered, and that had to be brushed off, of course, before we went out again. Hours we spent over that.
After saving up some of my 8 shillings, I was able to have a bicycle. And then came the question about rational dress. And there's a photograph I can show you there of myself in the first rational dress. You had a clapping thing that wrapped round right down to your knees, and then when you went to go home, you took it off and you folded it up and put it on the back of the bicycle and put your skirts on. Because it would never do for the neighbours to see you in what was called a very, very indecent dress. And I was going along one day, and a hansom cab driver looked down and he said, "Don't you want any children?" I was about 18. I don't know whether I replied to or not, but I can't remember. I expect I said something cheeky back.
The thing to be was decadent, which meant that you liked the Yellow Book, and that you liked the drawings of Aubrey Beardsley, and that you liked Salome by Oscar Wilde, and that you liked the poem also by Oscar Wilde, The Sphinx, from a dim corner of my room. For longer than my fancy thinks, a beautiful and silent Sphinx has watched me through the gathering gloom. That we thought was perfect.
We'd been cycling one Saturday afternoon, and as we came back over Barnes Common, there were about 8 of us left coming back that way, and the roadway was all up, so we went onto the pathway on our bicycles, and they all got through, but I was young and I was right behind, and the policeman stepped right out of his sideway, and I went right into his arms, and he took all our names and addresses, and we all had summonses, and there were 3 or 4 men sitting on the magistrates' benches and asking all sorts of things. And so one old man near the end got up and he put his hand up like, and he said, "Were the ladies on horseback?" So the clerk of the court said, "No, sir, on bicycles." "Oh," he said, very disgusted. And we were all fined 5 shillings each.
The girls didn't smoke, but we had slang. We had slang which was looked upon as not quite nice by our people. Everything was either ripping or foul or rotten.
Well, I won't tell you his name, but he was a well-known Irishman, and he was the Member of Parliament for some place in Ireland. And I went with him one night to dinner to the Café Le Royal, and they brought a great sort of cockadoodle thing, put it on the tray after we'd had dinner, and put it on the table. And I looked at it, and the friend who was giving me the dinner said, "Oh, it's all right, lift it up." And I lifted it all up, and there's a lovely ice cream outside inside, a great big bomb like as big as that. So I had a jolly good tuck in, and then I went back and did some work. And you know, we never quarrelled about going out in the evenings, and we never charged any extra, and I never got any overtime.
The boys used to drink beer, but we didn't drink except at slade dances and other dances, when we used to have what we thought was most doggish of us, claret cup.
You could get a pint of porter for 3 halfpence. But if you had a glass of anything better, brandy or anything like that, that was a bit dearer. But I do remember that they used to say that they got quite a good glass of gin for 2 halfpenny. So there was a lot of drunkenness, but there was a lot of poverty. And there were some very poor streets near Westminster Abbey. And there was a soup kitchen in York Street. And they used to come down with bowls in the winter, and they'd go in there with these bowls, and they'd get a great big bowl of soup and a chunk of bread for a penny.
No doubt we did think, "Oh my God, this is awful." We didn't say so, we never protested. Of course people worked in factories for about 2 shillings a day, if that. Of course people all wore hats in the street. Of course people called each other Miss and Mr. until they were engaged. Of course there was no such thing as anything but of course. He was a little pink-faced man with a squeaky little voice like that.
But it was a very amusing story, and I remembered it all my life, the way he said, "Ooh."
I went on being a feckless and indolent girl.
We never called ourselves teenagers, but we were certainly Victorians.